What's up, everybody? I'm Gio, and welcome back to Carvalho Creations, where I show you how to make awesome props and projects of your own. Now, a few weeks ago, I showed you guys how to make a monster mud pumpkin guy. And by the way, if you haven't seen that video, definitely go check it out. It's a super cool build. But in that video, I asked if you wanted to see another tutorial on how I use my airbrush to get this guy looking as cool as he does. And the answer was a resounding yes. So today's video is going to be all about airbrushing. Walk you guys through how some simple compressor settings to get yourself started, the different airbrushes I've used and the pros and cons of each. I'm going to show you guys how I mix up my paint and the paints I use. And then at the end, we're going to be doing some detailed hand paint to make this guy look as gruesome as he does. So there's going to be a lot of information in this video. So why don't we get in that creative spirit? Because we're about to go wild. All right, everyone. So in today's video, I'm going to be walking you through the process of how I turn one of these clay sculptures into an airbrush and finished piece that you'll be able to display for yourself. So this is all going to be about airbrushing today. I'm not going to go over the sculpture itself, and we're not doing a full body. This is only to do airbrushing. So hope you guys are ready. Now let's go over the material list a little bit. Now, first and foremost, you're obviously going to need your compressor, and the one I'm using today, I'll go ahead and link the description, or I'll link the product in the description down below if you guys want to use this specific airbrush. But I've used other ones, and I'll go over the different types I've used and kind of how I went through my process of learning to get down to what I do today. Also, you're gonna need an air compressor of some kind. Now, I'm gonna be rocking a 20 gallon, and that's only because I do furniture painting and I need something big, but you can always get yourself a little compact air compressor. And if you don't wanna buy them brand new, you can get them online, get them on Facebook Marketplace, or you can get them on OfferUp. And I've seen them go for like 50 bucks, and they're super cheap, and they'll last you a long time because you're gonna get a lot of use out of this gun if you do the steps that I'm showing you and you wanna do props just like this. So definitely gonna need those two things, and we're gonna be needing paint. Now, the paint I'm using, believe it or not, is just regular craft acrylic paint. Now, this is Crafters. I get this at Hobby Lobby. These things are 50 cents for a bottle, and they go a long way. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be like, oh no, you gotta use different paints, higher quality, but I'm gonna take you through some of the props that I've done over the last 10 years and show you how well the acrylic paints hold up over time and even weather. So we're going to be doing that today. I am going to go over some hand brushing as well, because even though you're airbrush painting, this is going to be an overall look, and then the hand paints will come at the end to get the real detailed things that you're not going to be able to do with the airbrush. So we're going to go over the entire process. Now, a couple things you may need, just optional things if you want to make this look real good. I'm going to be using an old wig today. Yeah, I've probably used this about, I don't know, 10 or 15 times already off of one mask. But anyway, a wig. We're gonna need some hot glue and hot glue sticks, obviously. Some scissors. I'm gonna use a heat gun just to help me dry the paint through the process so I don't have to wait, but that's totally optional. If you guys are out on a nice sunny day, it'll dry really quick for you anyway. So we're definitely gonna be needing some detailed brushes and just regular old water. And then to seal everything off, I'm gonna be using this Helmsman outdoor spar urethane. Now, the reason I use this, because a lot of my props go outside, I want to make sure they get full coverage and they're completely, I wouldn't say weatherproof, but weather resistant, to help them last a lot longer. Because these paints, if you don't coat them with a clear coat over the top, they're gonna wear on you a lot quicker, a lot sooner than they normally would if you had that clear coat over the top. So we're gonna go through everything. I'm gonna show you how to set up the compressor today. We're gonna show you how I set up my gun, how I mix my paints, how I apply it to the character, and the different layers I use, and the techniques, of course. So without any further ado, why don't we get ready to go wild? Okay, to start off today, I'm going to be showing you guys the compressor here. Now, all you're really going to need to know, and all the compressors are pretty much the same, they're all going to have gauges and dials to help you set the PSI. Now, for my gun, I'm supposed to be using 30 PSI. So this is the gauge for the PSI here, and basically all I'm doing is either bleeding some of the air out to get down to 30, or raising it to get to the 30 PSI for my air gun to work properly, to atomize all that paint to get it real nice and dusted. So that's what I'm gonna be doing here. Now, I have to have a connection that goes straight into my compressor here, and then I have an adapter to add to my air gun to get on this hose as well. So that's that little adapter here. Now, this is a 1/4 inch hose that I'm using that's attached to my actual air gun. And then I'm gonna add this adapter to this hose here. So as far as the compressor, that's all there really is that you need to know, is just make sure you set it to whatever your gun is rated for, and then you're ready to start spraying. So we'll go on to the next step, but yeah, just like that. Okay, so now let's talk about the airbrush itself. Now, obviously this is the one I'm gonna be using here. But when I started, I actually used this, and this was a $10 airbrush I got at Harbor Freight, and I didn't know what I was doing with the airbrush, so I needed something to test on, and I didn't want to get a new one, a more expensive one that I was going to go ahead and just mess up anyway. So I put this one through the ringer, and as you can see, it's pretty messed up. It's dirty, but it actually got me through a lot of projects that improved my paint skill over time a lot more just by using this. And also I was able to kind of hone in the skill a little bit more and learn how to use the brush completely. I like using the very budget-friendly things first because it helps me hone my skill a lot quicker. If I go to the top quality, or this is not even top quality really, but if I go to a better quality instrument to start off with, it has a lot of tweaks that allow me to get away with some technical errors that this isn't going to let you do. So the one with this brush here, this button on the top, all it allows you to do is press down to allow the airflow to come out. Now there's a little brass fitting here that you can twist around to help you with the flow control of the paint, but it's not very good. And it's real finicky, and it has a tendency to clog around the nozzle here because of the design of it. Also, this is a siphon fed, so this little glass jar comes out, and then you put the paint in here and then it siphons it through the tube. But I had a lot of issues with this because this little hose would get clogged all the time, and you can even see the particles of paint that are still on there that I had trouble getting off. It just gave me a lot of issues. Also, I would get a lot of gunk inside, and all those little flakes of paint would get stuck in the nozzle, and I'd have to stop what I was doing, clean it out, blow it out, clear the entire thing, and then start over again. So, but it was a good way to learn, and like I said, 10 bucks, you can't beat that. So I did start with this one. If you guys are getting started and you don't want to spend a lot of money, Harbor Freight, 10 bucks, this works perfect. But the airbrush I ended up getting, and this thing was only 25 bucks I think I spent, but it was perfect, and it actually gives me a lot more control. Now this one is a gravity fed, so you put your paint directly in here, and it has the nozzle in the front here. It's a lot more precise. Also too, this button, it's not a full dual action. Like when you press the button down, you can hear that a little bit. It allows the airflow to go through, and then when you pull back on the trigger, it allows more flow of paint to come out. So it's a little bit of getting used to. It's a learning curve for this for sure, but you're going to press down and then you're going to pull back slightly, and it'll help you to get that flow control of paint so you can get thinner or thicker lines. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see this on camera, but I'll just go ahead and put a little bit of water in here just so we can test it out. Push down the button, airflow comes out, and then when I start to pull down the trigger, and hopefully you guys can see a little bit of this, and I'll try to get closer to the camera, you can see how thick that ends up getting. So as I pull my finger back, that string's gonna get wider and allow more flow of paint to come through. So that's essentially why I bought this, plus the gravity fed tube, and it just worked out a lot better for me. So, alrighty, that's how this works. That's how this airbrush works. Super simple. And again, it's gonna take a little bit of getting used to when you start off, but it really, you can do it a lot quicker. You can do this, yeah, I mean, you're gonna learn very easily, so. All right, we're gonna get to the actual mixing of the paint now. Yo, let's start on mixing. Now, like I said, I'm using these Crafters acrylic paint. Super cheap. They go a very long way as well. But to start off, I like to use just a clear plastic cup to mix my paint before I put it into the actual airbrush itself. And I put just a tiny bit of water on the bottom so I don't have paint sticking to the bottom of the cup before I start. Now we're going to be doing a base coat of like a skin tone, but a little bit of green. This is a zombie after all, so I'm just going to put a little bit of paint. Obviously this is not open because ha 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 ha, so it's a good thing I have 100 of these. So I'm putting a little bit of paint in there, and maybe a drop or two of this. Okay, and then I'm gonna mix it up using my stirrer stick. Now, very important when we're doing this, we wanna make sure that this paint is completely mixed in. So if I mix it haphazardly like that, and I show you guys, you can see all the paint that sticks to the bottom. We don't want any of that paint on the bottom, because what ends up happening is all of this gets stuck in your nozzle and your airbrush and clogs it and ruins the brush. So We're gonna go ahead and give this a thorough mix. Now I'm gonna add a little bit more water. And the consistency I'm looking for is kind of like a milk consistency, like a non-fat milk. So not whole, but maybe non-fat, right? And we're gonna mix this up, and I like to tip my cup and scrape the bottom of this cup to make sure I'm getting every single bit of that paint mixed in really well. Now, there is a little bit of a learning curve to this as well. You're gonna put this in your airbrush and you're gonna try it out and see what works for you. Like, it took me a little while to get it really well, because if you add too much water, it's gonna be too thin, and when you go to spray it on your product, on your piece, on your sculpture, it'll run on you, it'll get bubbly, it won't be a nice coverage. If you mix it too thick, it's gonna get clogged in that nozzle and that airbrush. So we wanna go ahead and just mix this up really well, make sure there's no more flakes on the bottom. You can see that there, the flakes are pretty much gone. Alrighty. So also too, see if I can get this on camera. If I take a little bit on my stir stick here and just let it go against the cup here, you can see that that color will stay just a little bit, but it does drip down as well. So that means that it's not too thick, it's not sticking to your side of your cup, and it's not too thin where none of that color is staying either. So this is about the right consistency. And then what I end up doing is taking this mixture and pouring it directly into there. Now, if you want to go a step further, you can use like a little eyedropper and suck the paint mixture out and then put it into there, just to make sure you get absolutely zero paint flake inside. But I wouldn't. I've been starting to go ahead and just pour this in, and it seems to be working fine. Also too, before I get started with my airbrush, I like to just add a little bit of water and spray it through so it's not dry when I'm adding the paint. I want to really consider that paint getting stuck in there and making sure that that doesn't happen. But we already did that earlier on in the video, so I'm just gonna directly pour this in. And then we can get over to painting our sculpture. Okay, now before we actually get started on the painting, I wanna go ahead and just talk about the process I use to get these guys looking right. Now, I've done so many paint jobs in the past with props and Halloween projects just like this. So the first thing I like to do is I like to give this a nice medium tone base coat. Now, the base coat is super important because you want this guy to be completely coated so it looks even. So when you go to paint it, you can add the colors yourself and it doesn't vary in color too much from what the original character is supposed to look like. So I like to go with a medium tone. And the reason I start with a medium tone as well is because after that, I'll go in and I'll start shading in the darker areas, and then we'll do an even darker coat after that. Then I go and do highlights, and then I do an overall base to give this a more even and uniform look. Sometimes the airbrush can bleed into the other colors a little bit too much and it doesn't look right. So we're gonna go ahead and do a base coat first, let that dry completely, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, while our base coat is drying, I want to go ahead and just talk about what I do to clean the brush in between sets or in between different colors to clear it out. Like I said, the biggest thing you're going to have, the issues you're going to have is this nozzle clogging. So you want to make sure you keep it clear as much as possible. So all I'm doing is adding a little bit of water in here. And I'm just going to take my finger and rub it through the inside to release some of that paint from the inside of your little container here. And then I just dump it back into my paint. And I do this a couple times, okay, just to get the majority of that color out. And then I'll go ahead and put a little bit more water in. And then I use my thumb to block, or finger to block that nozzle, and then I pull back on the trigger. And what it's gonna do is gonna force the airflow to come back up into this little gravity-fed container here. You can see it bubbling. And what that does is it pushes any of that paint that could be collecting in this nozzle back up into here. So I do this a few times. My finger in there, rub it through, do it again, and then dump it out. Okay? Then I go ahead now that you can see that that water's a lot more clear, it's still a tiny bit murky, but it's more clear, then I just go ahead and let this completely run through to clear out this nozzle. Also take that clean water and shoot off the lid as well. Okay, so I do this every single time I change colors, and it's really going to help with the longevity of your brush itself. Keep that air and paint flowing really nicely through your nozzle. And I've had this one for about 6 months already, and I use it a lot. You guys have seen all my projects, so definitely do this step. Do not be lazy when it comes to cleaning out your brush. Just keep going. Make sure it's clean so it'll last you a long time. All right, before we start putting in the darks, I want to talk about color a little bit. First and foremost, when you're doing something like this, especially with these characters like this, you want to have as many reference pictures as you can get your hands on. Now, the reason I say that is because there's going to be a lot of different layers of colors in this that you're not normally going to see, but when you look and study some of these pictures and images, you'll be able to tell exactly how to get that perfect look. So now we're using acrylic paint, so everything is layering. So that's why we put a nice base coat down first, and then we start working in more detail and layering everything on top. Now, I like to go more subtle with the colors at first, and then a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper and make it more pronounced. Now, also too, when you're painting, you want to think about where you're going to have this prop. Now, if you're doing a haunted house, say, and it's going to be really dimly lit, you're going to want a lot of high contrast in your colors, so it's going to pop out and show in those dim lit areas. If this guy's going to be sitting in something like a focal point of a character as you walk in, it's very brightly lit, then you can start adding a lot of little details that people will be able to appreciate. So just keep that in mind when you're making and painting your characters. Now, for our next color, I mixed up, I don't know if you guys can see this on camera a little bit, I mixed up like a mauve kind of color, and the thought process behind it is this guy's a zombie, he's dead, so we're talking about a lot of browns and reds, but more of like a rust color because it's rotting flesh, right? So I keep that in mind when I go to paint this guy. So we're gonna go ahead and do this mauve color, and I'm going into the mouth, into the eye sockets, anywhere where there's deeper parts of the eyes and the face to really start to make a lot of this detail and all the sculpture we did here pop out. Okay, now that our character's just about finished, we did one base coat of color so far. I did 2 darker tones to really deepen in all the details here. And now I'm gonna go over with one more highlighting color. Now, you guys can see that on camera. It's like a creamy, milky color, but also I have a little bit of green in there just to continue on with this zombie look. And I'm going to go over all the raised areas, so the eyebrows, top of the nose, the teeth, just to bring out more highlights in the color, and it's going to finish this off. And then once we're done with this, I'll let this dry, and then we'll go back in and we'll do all the detailed paint to really create the character and bring it to life. One thing I do want to keep in mind when I'm doing this, I'm going very light on the trigger, so I'm hardly pulling back because I want to keep this flow controlled as much as possible as I create these highlights. I don't want anything splashing or spilling into any other parts of all the work we've done so far. Okay, so our dude is almost done. I'm gonna go ahead and do some more detailed paintbrush, add some blood splatters and maybe some redness to the eyes just to make them look a little more gross. But before we do that, I want to take you over to our spooky tree. If you guys remember this from a couple years ago, I did this guy with craft acrylic paint. I airbrushed it and he still looks exactly the same. And this has been outside for 2 years now, and it has no clear coat on it, and that paint is held up really well. So if you guys are worried about, you know, the craft acrylic paint not working out well, I guarantee it does last a very long time. And as a matter of fact, I'll stop the video and show you another project just in a second. I'm just taking through the backyard real quick just so you can see. Now, I did use some craft acrylic paint here on these awesome wooden oars I had refinished. That was years ago too, and that's lasted really well. But what I wanted to show you was this dragon head I did. This guy, again, to paint this dude up with his teeth and that eye, that's all craft acrylic paint. And this dude is over 10 years old. So when it comes down to durability of that craft acrylic paint, it lasts a very long time. Thank you so much for sticking with me to the end of our video today, and I hope you guys learned a little something from our tutorial. Now, I know these props can seem a little intimidating, but I promise you with a little bit of practice and following the tips and skills that I'm giving you, in no time at all, you'll be making props just as cool as this. As always, if there's a character or creature you'd like to see me recreate in the future, or perhaps you saw a technique you'd like me to elaborate on, please write me down in the comment section below. Make sure you leave this video a thumbs up while you're there, and until next time, keep building things, stay creative, and don't forget to go wild. I'm Gio from Carvalho Creations, and I'll see you next time. Man, look how cool this guy is. Don't you want to see your friends enjoy something as cool as this? So pretty.